Hi everyone, this is Graysen with PERRLA. I'm the COO, and today I'm going to talk to you just about a couple things that are new in PERRLA, as well as a couple tips that we think you might find helpful, especially with midterms around the corner and finals barreling down right after that. So today we're going to talk about sort of 4 things in our time together. First, we're going to talk about discussion posts and a couple things you may need to know about getting those discussion posts out of PERRLA and like PERRLA Online into your online forum. Then we're going to talk about the value of reusing references from your reference library instead of recreating references in subsequent papers. Next, we're going to talk about shared references and one of the changes we've made inside of Microsoft Word for reference usage when you're writing a paper with a friend or a group of people or someone that you've just been stuck with. Last thing we're going to talk about, and this one's really important, is versioning for papers in PERRLA Online. How you can access, download, and reset your paper to one of its previous save points in PERRLA Online. So that way, if you've made a mistake or you saved the wrong thing or you just want to go back and see something that you had in the last 30 days, you can do that. Now, before we dive into this, I do want to just take a second to remind you that we have an absolutely amazing customer support team. They're on the clock every single day until 10 p.m. Central Time. Monday to Friday, that's 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. And then on Saturday and Sunday, it's 1 p.m. to 10 p.m. All you have to do is shoot them an email at support@perrla.com, and we respond usually within minutes. But we're definitely going to respond under an hour during the time that we're working. And it's going to be an actual response. We read them, we write them. It's not a bot putting it together. We're actually taking the time to look at what you've said and make sure we understand it and how the software works and how we can get you started back on your paper with the right right foot forward. That way, you're making the most of your time and you're getting the paper done when you need it to get done. So support@perrla.com. You can email them anytime. And we also do have a help center at perrla.com/help. Got a bunch of articles and videos and tutorials there that if it's after hours or you want to see if you can find something yourself, you can always look for our help center. We've got a lot of great stuff that also talks about some of the biggest challenges that we see students having, as well as things with how to use PERRLA or just how to write. We've got a lot of great articles on that provide some great detail on the writing process and how you can sort of get the most out of writing in your time. All right, that's enough about that. Let's actually dive in and start off by looking at discussion posts. And we're going to do this inside of PERRLA Online. All right, so here I am inside of PERRLA Online on my computer, and I've got a discussion post. Bigfoot, fact or fiction. We're just going to open that up so we can see it here on the computer. Bigfoot, fact or fiction. Actually, I have an extra line in there I want to get rid of. You can see, looks great. I've done it. Nothing too long, right? This is a discussion post. It's not actually a paper. I'm just writing, usually it's a page or two at most. I've got some citations in here. And then I have just a few references. I'm really just trying to respond to what's going on in this week's reading. Now, when I finish this, I have a couple of options. I could take and I could go and I could try to copy all of this to my clipboard and then go into my discussion forum and paste it. Or I could take and I could download it as a Word document, right? I could download this as, say, a simplified Word file, then go into Word, copy the whole thing and paste it from there. But discussion posts actually have a built-in feature under the File menu, Copy Paper to Clipboard. What this is going to do when I click this, say, yep, copied it to clipboard, it's going to copy the entire contents of the paper to my clipboard. Like I had highlighted it and right-clicked and chosen copy. That includes the title at the top, the body with any of the content that's in it, including like these citations, as well as the entire reference section. All right, now let me just jump over here and open up just a Google Doc, doing a little bit of notes. Here I am in a Google Doc. I'm not actually in school, so I don't have access into a demo class or Blackboard or Canvas or something where I can post it in there. But a Google Doc is going to work very similarly. So I can come in here, I can go edit, and I can paste. That's it. You can see I have my entire paper pasted in here, the content. I've got these citations just as text, as well as my references. However, you may notice one or two big things, and that is these headings, right? So inside of the APA, MLA, and Turabian formats, they use headings to create the different styles or the breakdown for the paper. And the title of the paper, for instance, or the discussion post in this paper here, is a heading 1 style for APA, MLA, and Turabian. And so when we are copying that, it's getting copied as a heading. And so when it gets pasted into your forum or whatever, it's going to adopt the heading 1 style. Here you can see this when I have my cursor in here. This is actually a heading 1. If I want to change that, I can actually come in here. I can change that in Google Docs to normal text, right? I could actually get rid of it altogether if I wanted. I could bold it. You know, with discussion posts, one of the things that we see is that although APA has these heading styles, and MLA and Turabian do as well, discussion posts aren't big enough to really warrant having multiple headings or that kind of intricate structure. And a lot of times professors really want something totally different than what the APA style describes for their online forum posts. So in this instance, to get this to look like I would really want, I'm going to take and I can highlight both of these things. I can set them to normal text, and then I can bold that there. Let's get rid of that one space that's there. So that's the way my professor wants it. So I've had to do a little bit of tweaking to the text when I've pasted it in, depending on how that forum works. So for Blackboard or Canvas, they're all going to work a little bit differently, even depending on the version of Blackboard or Canvas that you're using. And so you may have to do just a little tweaking with those heading styles to make sure that they look correct for the forum that you're posting to. However, the content is all there. You're not having to take and spend all that time writing inside of the forum, where if your page freezes or it crashes, that content is lost and you have to start from scratch. You're not having to create those references in the citations. We're doing that for you still, but you may have to do just a little bit of tweaking when you paste that discussion post content in to your document. Now, one of the things that does happen sometimes, in Google Docs you can do this, but in Blackboard and Canvas you can't. And that's with a hanging indent, right? The reference sections inside of APA, MLA, and Turabian papers do use hanging indents for their references. So that second line would be indented further than the first one. In most Blackboard and Canvas forums, that's not an option. So you are going to have just a left aligned reference because the forum post area itself is not complex enough to be able to handle a hanging indent. Just a little thing there. Don't worry about trying to go in and add in an enter and spacing over a number of times. You're going to end up creating a big headache for yourself. If your professor is requesting that it has a hanging indent, I'd ask them how they format it. How do they do it? Because we haven't been able to find a way that Blackboard or Canvas really does it effectively, besides having to manually change stuff, and that's a nightmare. Because depending on your screen size and how wide your screen is, that indent actually goes somewhere else. So usually it's pretty acceptable just for those to be left indented, left aligned here, like normal, because of the restrictions of the discussion post. Okay, that's discussion post, how you can copy and paste that content using PERRLA Online in the File menu tab, copy paper to clipboard, and then pasting that into a forum or somewhere else. All right, let's dive into our second thing we're going to cover today, which is the value in reusing your references. Now, as you create references for each of your papers, PERRLA saves each of those references into your reference library. So if I'm here in PERRLA Online, I can go over into my references module on the left, and this is going to load my reference library. And you can see all the references that I've created over time. And this is great because as I create these references, they're actually being attached to different papers. So for instance, this one that's a blog, I made this one recently. I haven't actually used this one in paper yet. I just used it inside of the Chrome extension. But let's go back to references and let's find this toggle reference here. Here we go, Sasquatch content. You can see I use this inside of a research paper. Another one that I'll use a lot is this Funderburg. You can see this one I've actually created twice. But you see, I've used it in multiple papers. This is really helpful. There are some things that you can get by reusing a reference multiple times instead of recreating it each time you use it in a new paper. So if, for instance, I have a DOI that I'm using, I can create that reference once, and then when I go to use it in a new paper, instead of having to copy and paste and search for that reference again and reviewing the references information in the reference engine, I can just add it from my library, and I know that all of that's already correct. And then on the back side, PERRLA knows that this reference is used in each of these papers. So as you continue to use references across papers, we're keeping track of that. Now, that gets even better with research notes. And that's where I was going to dive into this reference here that I have. Let me go into the Chrome extension and open up research notes, which is where I already actually am. That Smithers reference, right? I'm going to view my research. Here I was looking at this blog entry and I was pulling out a few different quotes from it, adding citations to them, and as well taking some notes of my own, right? My own ideas. These are all available as research notes inside of this reference. Now, if I take and I go into, let's say, this discussion post we were looking at just a second ago, I'm going to take and I can add that reference from my library. It's this Smithers one right here. Instead of creating that reference again, because if I created it again, it's not going to have any of the stuff attached to it. It's not going to be connected across my papers. It's not going to have the research notes in it that I've created when I was actually doing my research. And so here, when I add that reference into this paper, I can actually go into my research notes panel here. And for Smithers, I can see these notes. And these are the notes that I took. And right, like any kind of note, I can pull this in and add it to the paper. I can also add in that quote, and you can see it's going to add that citation for me. I just need to make sure I put the period, move the period from out of the quote into the citation. And I can use that. Now, if I go, let me save this. Let's say I have a new paper, right? I've got another paper I need to create. Let's make a new discussion post, and this one is, again, about Bigfoot differences across states. Great topic. I could take, and if I need to cite that Smithers one again, I could recreate it using like the URL for the blog entry. However, I'm not pulling any of that content I spent all that time adding into PERRLA. So let me come back in here and let me add it to my paper. Again, just like we did in the discussion post. And now here again, I still have access to all the different content that I was using. So where this gets really awesome is if you have books or works that you're working with in a class across an entire semester. So you have a textbook, right? And you're going to be reading a couple chapters out of that textbook each week in class. You can take and you can create research notes as you're doing your reading, adding those notes into PERRLA. So while you're doing your discussion post, while you're doing your weekly papers, you've got those notes ready and in here and attached to that reference. Then when it comes to the end of the semester, not only have you worked your way through the book, but inside of PERRLA, you have a rich library of notes ready to go and ready to use inside your final paper. So I can also take and pull up, those research notes. I could say, I could search across my notes, across all the references in my paper for Bigfoot notes. Or I could say, phones. I don't have a ton of notes in this, but I could search across those notes for the content that I'm wanting to use. So I have a lot of that research already done. I have it there at my fingertips. I've got citations already built and added. So if I've got page numbers for each of these notes, I know I got that on page 4. I got that on page 87. When I get to page 390 at the end of the textbook, it's a massive textbook, by the way. I don't have to go back and dig for, where was that quote? I got to find it again and looking for that page number. I've got it all built in and ready to use. So when you're reusing references for multiple papers, you've got to be using them across the semester. Reusing them from your reference library not only saves you time in having to create the reference, not having to look at the reference engine content again, making sure that it's the editors or the people who put in the bibliographic information from the publishing house, that they typed it in correctly or whatever. You save time because you've already done that once. There's no need to do it again. But you're also able to keep the content with that reference across the papers. So you know what papers you've used it in. And if you're making research notes for that reference, those research notes are accessible inside of each of those papers and are building on each other throughout the course of the semester. I hope that makes sense. Just a little way that we see a number of students who will end up creating similar references over and over and over again, where creating it once, you've already got it, save yourself the time, and build on the work that you've already done. Okay, that's just some of the value in reusing references across your papers. All right, next up, we're going to look at shared references. And for this one, we're actually going to jump into Microsoft Word. All right, so here I have a paper that is, I'm writing, Graysen Pack, I'm writing with Serena, our wonderful mascot. The two of us together are talking about modern cryptids in America. And she has her part that she has done, and I've got a part that I need to start doing. In previous versions of Microsoft Word, so we released this probably towards the beginning of the spring semester in 2024, as Serena would add references, like this Childress reference, right? These are all references that Serena has added to the paper. And now it's my turn to start writing the paper as well. And we both use PERRLA because it makes, formatting your paper super easy. I have to take and I've got to add my own references, but I may also need to reuse this same Childress reference, right? That may be a shared book that we're pulling from the course. In previous versions of PERRLA, like last year, this reference would have been disabled when I open the paper because it's not my reference. That's Serena's reference. And I didn't have access into Serena's database. We've made a change now where I still can't make a change to this reference, right? It's still Serena's reference. It lives in her database. So you can see here inside that contextual menu, when I click the three little dots, I can't edit this reference because it doesn't belong to me. I cannot change it for her. It is her reference. It's in her library. The content in it is protected for her. However, I can create citations for it when I'm writing the paper. So even though it's not my reference, I don't have to recreate it, add it to my library, then I have a duplicate version of that reference inside the paper. I can take and I can quote the same reference that she's used when I start writing my content. So if I add a sentence here that I need to quote, I could take and I say, oh, this is from Childress. In previous versions, I would have had to have recreated that reference, or I would have had to put a note in so that she could go in and create the citation for me because it's coming from the same thing and I didn't have access to it. Now I have access to that reference and I can add a citation of my own. Page number 4, right? Ignore that little bit there. It's because I'm a developer. Not a developer, I have developer access. And there, you can see I can create a reference for Childress. And just like all of the references that we create and citations that PERRLA creates, it is going to keep up with where that citation is in my paper. If it's the first use, if it's a subsequent use citation, all of that is going to be relevant and there and present. So now when I'm working on a group paper with Serena, or you're working on a group paper with somebody else, if you both have PERRLA and are using it, which is a great idea, you can both use the references, create citations for the references that you've both added to the paper. You don't have to worry about your references being disabled for them and their references being disabled for you. So it makes the process of creating a paper where you have shared work and shared references a lot easier. Just a little thing, but we think that really does make this a lot nicer. Okay, last thing that we're going to dive into and talk about today is paper versioning. We're actually going to come back 2 papers, and we're going to go back into that discussion post that we were working on earlier. Whenever PERRLA saves your paper, now that happens automatically every 5 minutes. It also happens every time you add a citation, you add a reference, you edit a reference or a citation, you're adding headings, you're adding tables and figures. Anytime you're making a big change to the content in your paper, especially things that you're using PERRLA for, PERRLA is going to automatically save your paper and create a version of your paper for that instance. Now, inside of each of these papers in PERRLA Online, we can go to the Overview tab inside the paper. So when I come to the Overview tab, here on the right-hand side, I have Recent Paper Saves. PERRLA saves the last version of your paper indefinitely. So the last version, the last save for your paper, we've got that. It's going to stay there. It's not going away. However, all these other subsequent saves that are inside of here, we will save those for 30 days, 1 month. You can save those and you can see all the different versions of your paper for 1 month. So here you can see in this discussion post, right? I'd worked on this or a version of this quite a while back. So you can see there's that one version that was saved. And then I came in and I was doing a little bit of work on this earlier today, preparing for our time together. And so you can see here, I deleted a figure from the paper, and I deleted a table. I created a couple of citations. I removed a reference that actually didn't belong inside that discussion post. I updated the title page. Now, what I can do is I can take for any of these saves at any one of these points, I could take and I could preview a PDF. So I can choose preview PDF. It's going to open up a new tab inside of my browser, and I can see the PDF version of this document. Now, it's a research paper, and it's all in one section. The references follow right after the body. And this was while I was working on it. So you can see that's why that gets chopped off in half. If this was a discussion or a research paper, not a discussion post, then references is on its own page and it would never get chopped up quite like this. But you can see I can preview what the paper looked like at that point in time. Say, that's interesting, but not quite what I want. I actually want to view the updated title page. So let's preview this PDF. Here we go. Bigfoot, fact or fiction. I can see that that actually used to be Nessie, fact or fiction. See there. I can also take, for each of these, I can download those as a Word file, a PERRLA Word file, meaning it works with the PERRLA Word add-in. I could also download it as a simplified Word file, meaning that it's just a text-only version of my document. It doesn't work with PERRLA. It doesn't have any of those content controls around references and citations. It's a version that is great to turn in to a professor. Or I can download this as a PDF. I have all three of those options, and I can do that for each of the versions that I have access to. So all the changes that I've made in the last 30 days. Now, this is where this is really interesting. Okay, so we have right here where I added the reference from the library, the Smithers reference, into that paper. Let's go back to a point before I added the Smithers reference. This one right here. So let's preview the PDF. Yep, this looks great. There's no Smithers reference, only Bellamy, Bigfoot, and Billsley. Excellent. That's actually the version of the paper that I need to keep working on. Right, I've made some changes, but instead of going back and maybe undoing all those changes inside the document, I just want to go back to this point in the paper and start working forward from that. So I can take and I can restore this version. Are you sure you want to restore this paper? This is going to revert the paper back to that save point live. So yeah, this is exactly what I want to do, restore my paper. It's going to refresh the page, and it's going to open up my document, and I can see that my paper is now back at the point that it was. I don't have the Smithers reference as part of the paper any longer. Now, at this point, I can come back to the overview and say, oh no, I made a grave mistake. I actually really did want the Smithers version in there. So you can see here at the last save for the paper, where it was restored from 3/13/24 at 10:38, and that's actually it's 10:38 Central. So you can see I'm in Eastern time, so it's 11:38 my time. All right, so let's say, you know what, I don't want to do that. I do want to go back to the version that I had. This is not what I thought it was. Not a problem. I've got all those versions of my paper saved, so I can come back to the last save before I restored my paper, and I'm going to restore this version of the paper. Once again, it's going to refresh my page. You can see that it's updated it, and right down here, there's that Smithers reference again and the Smithers citation that I created. That's it. In PERRLA Online, you have access to 30 days worth of history of your paper versions, and you can reset your paper to any of those or download the paper from any of those versions as you need. This is really helpful for really big papers, especially if maybe you're hopping between computers, maybe something goes wrong with the internet, or you just want to go back and save a draft that you were working on last night. You really like something that you had deleted, you don't remember what it was, you don't want to have to try to rewrite it. Great, go back to that previous version, download it as a Word file or a PDF, and copy and paste it out of there right back into your document. You can access any of those at any point. All right, those are the big things that I wanted to talk about today. So they are, 1, discussion posts. You can copy the content for your discussion post to the clipboard and then paste it into your form. Just remember, with those headings, it may adopt the heading style that the form has. So you may have to tweak that just a little bit before hitting submit. All right, next up, we're going to talk about the value of reusing references. By reusing the references that you have to cite across multiple papers, adding them from your reference library, you're not only connecting the papers together where those references are used, but if you're adding research notes to those references while you're writing, you're building a rich library of notes that you can draw on later on in a dissertation, in a thesis, in a capstone, in the paper that's at the end of the semester, so that when you get to that big paper at the end, you've already got a lot of stuff that you can draw on and use and pull in that has citations already attached to it. Next up, we talked about shared references. Inside of the PERRLA add-in for Microsoft Word, you can now share your reference access. Your references have shared access inside of Word when multiple people are using your document and using PERRLA with it. So if me and you are working on a paper, I can add references to the paper and then you can create citations for them. Or you can add references to the paper and I can create citations for them. But they're still our own references. My references belong to me. Your references belong to you. I cannot edit yours. You cannot edit mine because they belong to each other. Cool. All right. Last thing that we talked about was paper versioning. How inside any of your papers in PERRLA Online, we save 30 days worth of saves for you inside the Overview tab. And you can take and you can view each of the changes that happened at each point in that paper's history. You can preview a PDF of what the paper looked like at that point in time. You can restore the paper to that version, or you can download that version of the paper as a Word document or a PDF. That's it. Those are some of the things that we think are really going to be helpful for you as you approach the middle and end of this semester, and at any point, really. Remember, if you have any questions, you can always reach out to our customer support team. They are available via email at support@perrla.com, or you can access our Help Center, where you have access to all sorts of articles for using PERRLA for Word, PERRLA Online, or a Google Chrome extension, or just how to write a paper in general. Well, that's all that we've got. If you do have any questions, reach out to us. Thanks so much for watching. Good writing. Have a good one.